A free bird leaps across the back of the wind and floats downstream till the current ends and dips his wings in the orange sun's rays and dares to claim the sky. But a bird that is caged down his narrow cage can seldom see through his bars of rage. His wings are clipped and his feet are tied, so he opens his throat to sing. And the way he sings, he is also telling a story, a powerful story. I opened with the words of poet laureate Maya Angelou, who uses her wisdom to highlight the power of storytelling. I want to thank Creative Morning organizers for extending this invitation for me to speak today. I must say I feel very honored to be part of this remarkable series on art. Can I have a little bit of light here? My eyes are so done. Thank you. Thank you. That's better. Yeah, I must say I feel very honored to be a part of this remarkable series of talks on art as a form of expression and culture. That is how we have to view artistic expression. Or people who major in the arts, who teach in the arts, they do so because such individuals have an obligation to preserve the culture. So it is fitting that I must take you through my journey, or the journey of my life as a poet, writer, and a literary practitioner. I must say it is a road that is filled with fond memories of love, but also with the complexities of life. It reflects on the theme of my talk, weaving my cultural heritage and displacing the postcolonial musings. I'm from a cultural background where we weave traditional baskets. So this is where now I draw this perspective or this notion of weaving my heritage. And in the process of weaving, I realized that I'm engaged on something way too powerful indeed, which is the displacement of the post-colonial musings. I will get to elaborate more on that as I give examples throughout this talk. So this talk is about how I am constantly negotiating my cultural identity in a space that seeks that reeks colonial impositions, Two important questions now follow. What do I mean by weaving my cultural heritage as an African, a Botswana whose history was negated by the British colonial legacy? What do I mean really by the displacement of the colonial or post-colonial musings? I will answer these questions and align them to the whole notion of what inspires me to write what I write. But as I did at the beginning with the words of Maya Angelou, emphasizing the power of storytelling, these words should serve as an encouragement to any aspiring, talented writer. If you are an artist in my situation or in my position, you are faced with challenges. And I want to draw from the atrocities of history on things that have been said as a way of replacing or silencing my own history. But before I do that, I will start at a much more general level by drawing some examples that may be known to some of you. The 18th century German philosopher Friedrich Hegel once claimed that Africa does not have history, and he went further to describe the place as depicting a natural man in his completely wild and untamed state. That was a history book written to be consumed, to be read, negating or erasing the history of other cultures. It is not only Hegel. We also know about Joseph Conrad's well-known novel, Heart of Darkness, which was celebrated for centuries by Western scholars who seriously thought it was a good work of art, while the matter of fact was that it portrayed Africans in a stereotyped manner. This novel dismissed the Africans he saw in the Congo to primitive savages and bloodthirsty cannibals who needed to be improved with Western civilization. Even if the novel talks about rivers from Europe, it erases the memory of the beauty in the River Congo. The critics or proponents of this novel even went further to defend inherent racism in Conradian novella after a post-colonial Nigerian novelist, Chinua Achebe, exposed the racism in this work as an intervention to the colonial musings. He later contributed a well-known post-colonial novel, known to most of us again, Things Fall Apart, which explores pre-colonial Africa through to colonial Africa through the character of Okonkwo, who dies a very painful death because of disillusionment. It is not only Hegel and Joseph Conrad or interventions from the likes of Chinua Achebe, but we know that Olaudah Equiano was a slave who bought himself out of slavery so that he could tell his own stories. The one with the capacity to not only tell his experience but also influence change. Such slave narratives were not really taken seriously or appreciated until recently. So, many colonial narratives that exist are designed conveniently to destroy the image of Africa by portraying the Western images as superior and conventional. This is achieved through silencing and subtle delineation of virtues that must be cultivated by the West to displace cultures and spread Eurocentrism. It is apparent usually, like it comes obvious through literature and film as examples of Western cultural production. For instance, in the case of Botswana, films such as The Number One Ladies Detective Agency, The Gods Must Be Crazy, and A United Kingdom have become representations of Botswana in the West, where they have audience and profit regardless of their inaccuracies in depicting the history of Botswana. Even though we resist this form of silencing, it is hard to stop this trend of displacement, which creates what a Zimbabwean novelist, Tsitsi Dangarembga, calls a nervous condition in her novel. Therefore, it is understandable why a writer and a poet like myself finds himself in a very tight situation when composing any form of art, be it prose, be it poetry, be it film, the list goes on and on. I am caught between having to tell stories on the aftermath of the legacy of colonialism in Botswana. At the same time, I am compelled to draw from a well of my tradition, my cultural heritage, so that my image could be what you see, not an image created based on the Western notions. I come from an artistic background of minoritized languages and literatures that has suffered a gross marginalization from colonial impositions. For example, Setswana language, which happens to be my mother tongue, is written in a Latin-based alphabet which ignores an abundant wealth of cultural symbols that have been in existence for centuries before colonialism. And growing up, my real history of Botswana was not taught because our education system was based entirely on the British model. So these are the challenges that I faced as a teacher who had to sort of implement that kind of curriculum and teach students who, in some cases, neither speak Setswana or English as their mother tongue language. I remember also how the history of colonialism was taught as if it was nothing terrible. For example, we were taught about the advantages of colonialism. Teachers would tell us that colonialism brought literacy. It taught people how to read and write. Obviously, working on the assumption that the people of Botswana or Africans in general did not have writing systems put in place. We have also heard of people who apparently went to Africa and then all of a sudden they discovered the rivers and lakes. We talk of Victoria Falls. Many of those places that are named after former colonial figures. I like to use this example like maybe it would be a very good idea that after I leave Athens, I suggest we change the name of Hokkien River and call it the River Phetlhe. How would that be? So, I'm an example of those ones who witnessed colonial history being showered with accolades and romanticized. We were told lies that Botswana was never colonized, unlike other African countries, but rather it was protected by the British from the Boers who had invaded South Africa. Hence why it was called Bechuanaland Protectorate. So that was designed to make us feel better, as if the kind of colonialism that we received was way much better. I have also witnessed the return of the remains of El Negro, whose body was stolen from a grave for shameful display in France and Spain. Yet this part of history was not taught. His grave sits in Tsholofelo Park in Botswana, Gaborone, as a monument. So when other children read books that reflected their worldview and cultural perspective, in our side we read and sang songs that pushed us further and further from our roots, not in our own languages, and that became a way of judging real success. This child speaks English very well. He is intelligent. Assuming or insinuating that those who did not speak good English and spoke their mother tongue languages were stupid idiots. This is the kind of situation that sadly currently exists. And I like to say when I'm in Botswana, I have lived in English-speaking countries for a while now, but I've never seen any school being called the English medium. It's either the private school or the public school. But in Botswana, you will see what you will be seeing places like English medium, where the rich will probably take their students to learn better. Now, from my perspective, that's a way of colonizing or instilling that violence to young children. That was not enough. We read books written by outsiders, the books that reflected a worldview that was not ours, and therefore that meant we had to struggle with foreign concepts using a foreign language. Books like Google Eyes for children's literature, despite their irrelevance to our cultural context, were read. We also sang songs that invited us to curse the arrival of rainfall, even though our country needed it for agriculture. We sang, "Rain, rain, go away, come again another day." But Botswana is a dry country. So these are the musings that keep recurring to my mind and creating an image that I cannot do without if I'm to be a good storyteller. We also sang in the school choir a song that I cannot forget. It's just like stuck in my mind. Some talk of Alexander and some of Hercules. I didn't know the meaning behind this song until I became a scholar. This is when I realized that this is a traditional marching song of British, Australian, and Canadian military units, which dates back to the 17th century. It remains unclear to me why we were caused to sing this song, and when we had our own war heroes such as Mzilikazi, Murama Chobane, Shaka Zulu, and others whom we were never singing or composing songs about in the formal curriculum. We didn't know this or what we were doing because we were children, hence why I want to denote this as a form of colonial rape. And then there was the Bible translated into Setswana with a colonial mentality aimed at denigrating Setswana culture. In the same Bible that we read, the cultural concepts such as badimo were deliberately mistranslated by the missionaries as demons. The missionaries overlooked the fact that the concept of badimo was central to Setswana traditional values. They are still regarded as high ones in the Setswana cultural context. And according to Dube, who is a Bible hermeneutic scholar, she brings this point further to say the word badimo literally means the high ones or ancestral spirits in Setswana cultures. Badimo are sacred personalities who are mediators between God and the living. Musa Dube records her shock upon reading the Bible in Setswana. She says, upon reading Matthew 15 verse 22, she says, I found that where the Canaanite woman said, my daughter is severely possessed by demons, it was translated, that is, my daughter is severely possessed by the ancestors or the high ones. This was a way of moving us away from telling our story. So religion was also equally complacent. I'm bringing this point out to give you an appreciation of the challenges that storytellers in my situation grapple with and face. And as such, they have to constantly think about colonial impositions as part of the imagination. One finds himself surrounded by some sad political and historical reality, but despite that, stories have to be told. These were dangerous cultural bombs and colonial landmines planted in the child memories to alienate us from our culture. By the way, I did not mention all this because I want you to feel sorry for me. Conrad is ironically thought to have felt sorry for Africans in terms of how Europe acquired its wealth through exploitation. The point here is to help you understand what is at the heart of my creative composition as a storyteller. I write from the bottom of my heart, and I listen to my inner self, and I honor the spirit of my ancestors. I do not write about the sad reality only. I tell stories centered around my culture. The colonial legacy does not define my life as a poet and storyteller. That is why I am unconventional. I write on diverse themes of racism, love, change, and determination. And my work is inspired by writers and poets coming out of age such as Barolon Seboni, Ngugi wa Thiong'o, and Maya Angelou. I want to read a short excerpt from the book that I translated into English, the first Setswana novel being translated and having a review written in English, to reiterate what my identity is really all about. I'm going to draw an excerpt from page 103, which gives us something to think about. So this is a conversation between two characters in the novel. So the old man moved backwards from a rock where he was sitting and then continued. A head louse once had a conversation with another one found in the clothes. The one in the head was ashamed of its blackness. It then asked the body louse what it must do to look whiter like the body louse. It wanted to look like the body louse, especially after sucking blood, so that it looks red like summer flowers. The body louse suggested to the head louse that it was better for him to quench himself and bath in boiling water. That would in return remove its black color, its blackness. Blindly, the body louse listened and then jumped into boiling water and died. Any creature that tries to transform itself from how the ancestors created it, it will die. So there are so many ways that describe this kind of death. Sometimes we die because we are way too consumed on Western theories and not producing our own cultural knowledge. Or in other cases, failing to really understand what the decolonization narrative is all about. But I am a firm believer that every story that shares a cultural experience should be given a chance to be told. And as a Pan-Africanist, I have seen how the Western theories dilute our epistemologies, seek to correct and validate them to the point that if we are not careful, we will lack our own sense of imagination and therefore fail to produce new knowledge. I see storytelling as a platform of cultural diversity which we should use to fight the ills of the world, such as xenophobia, misogyny, and racism, etc. We also should learn to share stories using our mother tongue languages. Doing so allows one to express themselves in a meaningful way through the use of proverbs, riddles, and use of cultural symbols as well as images. We do so proudly, even as members of the diaspora within small communities like this, with courage and without fear. We do so to recognize the role of storytelling in decolonization and in finding our voice. In so doing, we are basically doing what Chinua Achebe had suggested, that a lizard who jumped from a high Iroquois tree, said he would praise himself if no one else did. I want to adopt that similar attitude and conclude by sharing with you a poem about Odi. The question now is, what is Odi? Odi is where I come from. That's my birthplace as a Mokatla whose totem is a monkey. And what is a monkey? If someone in Botswana refers to me as Kabu, I realize that here it could be dangerous. It could be interpreted as a racial list or racist connotation. But elsewhere in Odi, in Katleng, in Muchudi, that is my totem. So our cultural images differ, and therefore our stories also differ. So that's why we need to create this platform where we can share freely stories from our cultural background. I will conclude by reading a poem. I have a musical element that accompanies this piece. It's entitled Odi, and after this I will be happy to take questions and comments. And I would also encourage you to grab yourself a copy of the Abomination to learn more about storytelling from the perspective of Setswana culture. Odi. Like rafters of a Randaville mud hut, you sit between hills, hissing against the effect of the simmering and scorching sun. Except when rain drops gather to transform your deserted plains, and then spread again to reveal your healing effect, leaving your being naked and enthused. You sit near rivers and acacia trees. Your grassland looks like pubic hair, unless attacked by termites or sometimes by your cattle that chew cud and goats that bleed when constipated. Your alacrity does not break or crack except by the river, somewhere near Lephaleng. Raindrops collect in the deep pockets of your rocks and gullies. They leave the green grass there singing. Rainwater there sits still and collected in a goatskin sack, like a dark concoction of a medicine man or a diviner. Odi, you glimmer with beams of hope, hues of splendor, and sonorous anthems and requiems. Rare soundings languish in your mastodon belly, but at times with the stench of a skank you squint when Noctoni River is polluted. When beaming and dancing you harness the atmosphere with your ancestral wisdom, as if you were wind that arrived at the nightfall and dawn, when we were still watching the clustered sky and stars, the Babaraledi and Mpatlalazani. We interpret the hidden meaning of each one of your sky law witticisms and then leave it languishing somewhere in the deep depths of our myths. Yesteryear, when you struck like Kladi, you ambushed one of your villages like a predatory crocodile, concealed somewhere along debris and mud-infested waterway. And then when another day breaks, those anguished are left to mumble a funeral song, while many hands of your villagers stop mixing mud with dung to accuse each other, each witch or wizard for bringing Kladi that claimed one of your totems. we are back to throwing bones again, fuming with revenge. We won't stop till we find the responsible culprit. When you yawn at dawn, your cattle bellow and goats bleat their troubled and constipated stomach away, while the cattle languish chewing cud. They bellow and goats bleat as if they are announcing the pride of your wealth and the wisdom in the tales of your tricksters. Odi, you are to me a home where the wind will carry us. Who are you, Odi? Who are you? Are you the village of rain or dust? Who are you? Sprouting erect and spreading against the current of the wind that nearly carried us to our fate? An ululation of each one of your caloosed women when the splatter of Letsema arrives is the reason for my quietening of your conundrums. Each ululation is not complete unless accompanied by a riddle or proverb. They stand with their pots cooking traditional beer for a ritualistic procession, as if answering the beer too ejaculates foam, causing men to croak and quake like toads. Still, they sing cradle songs to quieten those curious children, decorated by their motherly regalia. They put them to sleep and not to silencing them per se, for they have to speak too. So they wake up energized like galloping antelopes. Your Bujale initiates cough, a sonorous chorus at the heart of the Phetlhe, where the traditional beer was left to ferment, but now drying in each cracking calabash. The beer pot is empty too. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith, one more time.